The Blessed Sacrament. The Center of Immutable Truth. By Cardinal Manning. The Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us. Corpus Christi is a second feast of the Nativity, a Christmas festival in the summertide, when the snows are gone and flowers cover the earth. And whence comes all this joy? But from the divine fact which St. John declares, the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Morning by morning, in the Holy Mass, the Church recites this great charter of its incorporation and of its existence. Morning by morning it bears witness to the divine, permanent, and immutable presence of Jesus in the glory of grace and truth. The Blessed Sacrament is the Incarnation perpetually present, manifested to faith, and I may say, to sense, and applied to us by the same divine power by which it was accomplished. The Word, that is, the eternal wisdom or intelligence of the Father, co-equal, co-eternal, consubstantial, personal, the only begotten Son, God of God, light of light, true God of true God, in all the fullness of the divine perfections, was made flesh, assumed, that is, our manhood with body and soul, into the unity of his divine person, and the flesh and manhood became the flesh and manhood of God, the root and productive principle of the new creation of God. From the natural body of Jesus springs forth the Eucharistical or sacramental body, by which we are renewed in soul and body, and next, the mystical body or the Church, in which the head is united by a vital and substantial union with his members, that is, the one holy and only Church of Jesus Christ, the tabernacle in which he dwells. According to the word of the evangelist, he made his tabernacle both in our humanity and in the midst of us, and in this visible tabernacle, ever expanding in all the world, perpetual throughout all ages, he dwells under the canopy of the heavenly court, manifesting his glory in the 7 sacraments of his grace, and in the infallible doctrines of the faith. Jesus is therefore the divine teacher, always present, sustaining and declaring the whole revelation of faith. The presence of the incarnate Word in the Blessed Sacrament is the basis and the center of an order of divine facts and operations in the world. They spring from it, rest upon it, and are united to it, so that where the Blessed Sacrament is, they are. Where it is not, they cannot be. For example, in the natural order, the creation is the basis, and its perpetuity is the center, so to speak, of the whole order of natural facts and operations, springing from the omnipotence of God, whereby this world was created and is always preserved. These facts and operations rest upon creation as their basis, spring from it, and observe its laws. Men believe in them because they are sensible and palpable. They believe them to be permanent and immutable. They believe in the laws, powers, operations, activities of nature, in the succession of day and night, of seasons, tides, and growths, but they are so immersed in sense that they cannot realize, and will not believe, that there is a higher order of divine facts and of supernatural operations, more permanent, more immutable, more unerring, of which Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament is the creative and sustaining center. The Blessed Sacrament, then, is Jesus personally present in the midst of us, seen by faith, received in substance, known by consciousness and adored in his glory. 1. And first, it is Jesus present, both God and man, in all the fullness of his incarnate person. As God, he was always present in the world. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. By him all things consist, that is, hold together, cohere in the permanence of their existence. From the beginning of the creation, the Word pervaded all things by his essence, presence, and power. He was, therefore, personally present, but not as the incarnate Word is present now. His presence in the Blessed Sacrament is the fruit of his incarnation, and his incarnation is a presence distinct in kind from his presence before the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. It is the perpetuity of the same presence, as that with which his disciples were familiar, in the 3 years when he conversed with them, and in the 40 days after he rose from the dead. When he said, "I will not leave you orphans, I will come to you," they understood him to promise that he, the very same who spoke with them, would return to them. And on the night of the first day of the week, after he arose from the dead, He came, while the doors were shut, suspending the laws of nature, and stood in the midst, and said unto them, See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself, for a spirit hath not flesh and bone as you see me to have. It is I, the very same whom you have known, the same Lord and Master with whom you have eaten, and drunk, and conversed, whose words you have heard, whose miracles you have witnessed, whom you have seen to multiply the bread in the wilderness, and to walk upon the water, on whose bosom John lay at supper, and whom you have loved as your brother, kinsman, and friend. It is I, who am come to you again in all my personal identity, and in all tenderness of my divine and human sympathy. It was in this sense the disciples understood his words, when before his ascension he said, Behold, I am with you all days, even unto the consummation of the world. They understood him to promise to them a true and personal presence, which should restore all they had before possessed, of nearness to them, both as God and man. Therefore it is that he said, It is expedient for you that I go, for the coming of the Paraclete has brought with it the universal presence of Jesus, not in one place alone, but in all the church, and not transiently and for a moment, but abiding unto the end of the world. It is this which has formed the center of the visible church on earth. Jesus manifested, I may say, in the Blessed Sacrament, Jesus dwelling in the tabernacle, over whose divine presence, the visible church rises in its majesty and beauty throughout the world, as an earthly sanctuary of God among men, the shrine and ciborium of the incarnate Word. In all the world the same sacramental presence is the center of the same ritual of divine worship. Before it, day and night, hangs the light, in witness of its perpetuity. Before him all who pass bow down. About his presence stand 7 orders of ministers, to serve in degrees of approach to his person. The presence of Jesus offering himself for us is the Holy Mass. The Holy Mass is the worship of the universal church. All springs from it, or relates to it, the center and the source of all. Such is his personal presence. 2. I have said he is seen by faith. St. John says, that which was from the beginning, which we have seen with our eyes. They saw Jesus. We see him not, but in what did they see more than we? They saw Jesus, and Jesus is God. They saw, therefore, God manifest in the stature and configuration of our manhood. They saw the manhood, but the Godhead they could not see. They saw his divine works. They saw his glory, the glory of his transfiguration, of his resurrection, of his ascension, but the glory of the only begotten of the Father is the essential glory of the eternal Son, his co-equality, his infinite perfections, of love, of wisdom, of goodness, and of power. But these glories no eye of flesh and blood could see. What they saw, we see, with one distinction. We see his presence, and the glory of his grace and truth. We see his works of supernatural power, and the perpetual operations of his love. Nay, I may go further. There are 3 faculties of sight: sense, reason, and faith. Each has its sphere. Sense, unless misdirected, is infallible in its reports. Reason elevates and corrects sense, and has a nobler sphere and range of its own, a higher realm and a wider jurisdiction. But faith is above both, elevates both, corrects both, and is supreme and infallible in a sphere which is divine and eternal. The Jews who saw Jesus by sense knew that he was man, and believed him to be the carpenter, whose mother and sisters we know. They wondered at his words, saying, Whence hath this man letters, having never learned? Sense carried them no further. Nicodemus, by reason, knew him to be a teacher sent from God, for no man could do the miracles he did, except God were with him. This was a dictate of reason, and an interpretation of facts subject to sense, by which they were elevated to a higher truth. Peter knew him to be not only man and a teacher sent from God, but to the dictates of sense and reason he added the illumination of faith, which elevated both. When Jesus asked him, Whom say ye that I, the Son of Man, am? Peter answered, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered, Flesh and blood, that is, the knowledge which comes by sense and reason, hath not revealed this unto thee, but my Father who is in heaven. The illumination of faith has elevated thee to this knowledge. In like manner, we know the presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. Sense reports to us that what we see has the aspect of bread. Reason tells us that everything has its proper substance, but the sense cannot penetrate beyond the aspect. It has no cognizance of what lies beneath or beyond. Reason alone can pass the boundaries of sense. Such is the dictate and report of sense and of reason upon the unconsecrated host. But the same reason illuminated by faith knows the incarnate Word and His revelation, and His promises of presence and of power. It knows that Jesus has ordained the perpetuity of His own priesthood, and of His own divine action, whereby the bread and wine pass by elevation from the order of nature, in which sense and reason dwell and reign, to the order of divine power, which is above nature, wherein faith alone is supreme. It is a dictate of the reason, illuminated by faith, to believe that what the sense still sees under the same aspect, is after the words of Jesus have been spoken, no longer what they seem, but what they are divinely declared to be. Reason elevated and corrected by faith knows them to be Jesus personally present in all the fullness of His Godhead and His manhood, under a veil, or aspect, which is visible to the sense, as the vesture He wore. But this was not Himself, and yet it was the pledge of His presence, and the channel of virtue which went out of Him, to heal all who touched so much as the hem of His garment. It is true, indeed, that we do not see the visible form of Jesus, His sacred countenance, His divine beauty, the glory of His manhood. While He was upon earth, His Godhead lay hid, but His manhood was visible. Here both lie hid, and only His vesture is revealed. When our sense and reason tell us the Blessed Sacrament is visible, then the same reason by the light of faith tells us Jesus is present, and we behold His glory, as the only begotten of the Father, the fountain of all grace, the perpetual and divine teacher of infallible truth.